A Heroine's Beginning, Chapter 17. James and I made our way down the winding staircase. He had thought we'd better go and tell the other men that we had found her. They would still be looking. We did not dare speak until we got back into the dark corridor. We wanted to be sure not to disturb Ella and Lord Christopher. Once the door was closed behind us, James began to speak.
"I do not mean to pry, but why exactly were you forbidden from entering this house again?"
"I may or may not have called her ladyship a witch," I told him. As I predicted, he burst out laughing. "She had just dismissed all the servants, with no real reason, so I felt it was justified."
"But she clearly didn't dismiss all of you. There was that servant girl upstairs, and the one in the kitchen now."
"They are not servants," I told him. "The one downstairs is her youngest daughter, Jacqueline, and the one we just rescued is her stepdaughter, Ella, the person who has lived here since birth. I used to work for her parents, before they both sadly passed on, and Lady Evil took over."
"So you're saying that the child of the former owner of this house does not run it?" he inquired.
"No, she does not. Her stepmother made her a servant, no, a slave in her own house. She gets no money, no time off, and although she will not tell me exactly what they did to her, I know they did something several months ago, and she has never disobeyed them since. Clearly until today," I informed him.
"Interesting,"
was the only response I got from James. We emerged from the darkened corridor, back into the kitchen. Jacqueline had left, and there were only Lady Kingston, Lady Anna, and the two men stood by the door, making sure they did not leave. Lady Anna looked a little scared, but Lady Kingston showed no such emotion. Her eyes were shooting daggers at me. Her mouth had morphed into an inhuman snarl. Her complexion was as pale as ice, and she emitted an aura of pure hate. Her face was solid, unmoving as she glared at me. I was not going to be intimidated, though. She could ill-wish me all she dared. It was not going to ruin my mood of triumph and relief at finding Ella. James, who was standing next to me, was also staring at Lady Kingston, though I found it impossible to figure out what he was thinking. We stayed like this for a moment, each daring each other to back down. It was James who broke the silence.
"Marion, could you go find the others, please? I would like to have a little talk with Lady Kingston here."
I did not question him, but nodded and walked right past her, keeping my eyes forward, towards the door on the far side of the room. I opened it and walked outside, back down the steps, past where I had dropped my bag in front of Ella on my first day. I smiled a little at the memory of it. How much had changed since then. I kept walking around the house and in through the front door, where I could hear the loud footsteps of the men walking around the house, trying to find the door that led to the attic. "Lord Christopher has found her. There's no need to continue looking," I shouted. 2 pairs of footsteps stopped, and one of the men shouted to the last man, telling him to stop. All 3 of them walked down into the entrance hall where I stood, and the first one asked me a question.
"What are our orders now?"
he asked. I was stunned. I had never been asked before to give orders. I knew he meant, had Lord Christopher or Lord James given any orders, but it still felt strange to be asked. "I think you should ready the horses. I imagine you'll be leaving soon." The man who asked the question nodded, and they all walked past me, out of the open front door. I was left all alone, standing in the house that I used to live in. All was quiet. I lifted my head and looked around. I had not been back here, in the main part of the house, since the day my mother died. The colored walls were the same. The staircase rose before me. I had lost count of how many times I had scrubbed those wooden steps. Although it was hard work, I enjoyed it. This house had been so full of laughter and joy. You could nearly always hear Ella singing when she was happy, and it echoed through the corridors. Or Mrs. Pole, nervously chattering when there was something big happening and she had to get items crossed off her list. Or Mrs. Taylor's strict, yet kind way of telling me exactly where things belonged in her kitchen. I could hear the deep chuckle of Sir Henry that he used to give whenever Ella was doing something that was completely Ella, dancing barefoot in the garden,
or insisting we shouldn't catch the mice, because they were living creatures too and needed a place to live as well. Lady Eleanor's voice drifting around the room, her kind way of thinking, and how she always asked for everything politely, her tone letting you know how welcome you were in this house. I had loved this place. It was never quite home, but for 3 years it was very close. I was pulled out of my thoughts by a small pain in my abdomen. It had been a few hours since I drank my tea, and the effects were beginning to wear off. As much as I loved the horse ride, I don't think it did anything to help banish the pain. I knew I had to get back home. Not only did I need more tea, but it was well past midday, so my siblings would be getting hungry, if they had not already helped themselves. So, with one wistful last look, I smiled at the house, and then turned around and walked out of the door for the last time. I got halfway back home, when I heard loud horses' hooves getting closer and closer to me. Without turning around, I moved to the side of the path to let them pass. But they did not go past. The sound of the horse came to a stop just behind me, and I had to look. James was climbing off the horse, a look of relief in his eyes. "Where do you think you're going?" he asked, landing on the ground. "Home. I have things to do," I told him. "So you just left, without saying goodbye?" he inquired. "I really have to go. I've been gone far too long already. And besides, you were busy, and I was not going to disturb Ella and Lord Christopher." "Why do you always call him Lord?" James asked with a small laugh. "Because he is a lord. I'm of lower rank than him, so I call him by his title, as is expected." "So what do you call me?" "Lord James." "I've told you before, I'm only a sir, not a lord." "Lord Smug suits you better." "You're right, it probably does," he laughed, his green eyes shimmering with mirth. We fell into a comfortable silence for a moment, when the pain snapped me back into reality. "I really do need to go. My family will be missing me." "Ah, yes, your 5 brothers." "And 2 sisters." "Stars above, there are even more of you. Do you also live with 20 cousins and 16 aunts and uncles?" "No, just my siblings and father. But I really have to go." "May I offer you a ride?" he asked, gesturing to the horse he was holding by the reins. The pain in my belly was worsening with every passing moment. I knew that sitting on top of a horse would not do much to lessen it. "No, thank you. I'll walk. And I think you are needed back at the manor, I imagine. Lord Christopher and Ella will have matters to take care of." "You're probably right," he said with a sigh. "But before you go, if you are Ella's friend, I would imagine you'll be invited to the wedding." "Are they actually engaged? Did they come down from the attic?" I asked him before I could stop myself. "No, they haven't come down yet. But do you doubt they will be engaged when they do emerge?" I shook my head. If their behavior at the ball was any indication, there was no doubt that Ella and Lord Christopher were going to be married. "Then I will look forward to seeing you there, and I hope you will save a dance for me." He smiled, no longer smug, but one of genuine feeling. I smiled back at him. "Maybe if you're lucky," I teased. His hand moved forward and took mine. He grasped it tenderly, and then lifted it to his face. "Until next time, my lady," he said, and then kissed the back of my hand, just like he had done at the ball. I could not stop the blood from running to my cheeks. I could feel them heating up. "Until next time, Lord Smug," I told him. We both laughed a little, and then he dropped my hand and walked to his horse. He lifted his leg into the stirrup and swung his other so he was sat upon the horse. He made a clicking sound, and the horse began to move, turning around slowly. James looked down at me and shouted, "Goodbye, Marion," and I called back to him, "Goodbye, James." Then he was gone, riding back up the path. I watched as the silhouette disappeared around the corner, and then turned back around and started back toward home. Just wait until everyone hears about this, I thought.